My first memory with politics was probably in the third grade. We had a whole school-wide election with, it was the 2008 election, John McCain and Barack Obama. And I didn't know anything about politics. I just had heard what my mom talked about at home. So I distinctly remember voting for John McCain in the class election and someone coming up to me and saying, "That's sad." And I was 8 or whatever, so I did not know what racial prejudice was or anything like that. But obviously that's what she was referring to. Yeah, so in a weird way, honestly, Trump kind of influenced my views.
So we're coming up on 4 years since Donald Trump announced his candidacy for president.
We are going to make our country great again.
In the opposite way, like, that's not what I want to be. Because I remember it was 2015, I believe, when he announced his candidacy, and at first, like, with my very limited knowledge, I was like, okay, that makes sense, he's a businessman, and we have a bad economy from what I've heard. So I was like, yeah, that makes sense. But then as the campaign went on and then you start hearing these things that he's talking about.
You've shared a video of a man chanting white power to millions of your supporters. You've said that black professional athletes exercising their First Amendment rights should be fired.
I was like, yikes, that's not really cool. I don't really agree with a lot of that stuff. And then I was like, oh wait, I'm having opinions that aren't what my parents think. Like, they don't agree with me on this. And so that's kind of where I started gaining my own views, and that's really where, like, my socialization started. Yeah, so my thesis that I'm working here on North Central College for my senior thesis is going to be using January 6th as a jumping off point.
Good evening, I'm Judy Woodruff. On the NewsHour tonight, chaos at the Capitol. A mob supporting and encouraged by President Trump.
I want to focus on how the state of democracy is being viewed from a rural perspective and a urban perspective. And then, like I said, using January 6th, the insurrection at the Capitol, as like a jumping off point for that. Originally, I wanted to talk about this topic just in a more broad sense because there was something that interested me. Then this really big event happened earlier this year, which really interested me for a couple of reasons. One, it's one of those like historical events that you're like, that you don't think that you're ever gonna like live through, but obviously we've had a couple of those in the past few years. But this is something that you haven't really seen ever in this country, where people are actually breaking into the Capitol building with means of overthrowing an election. So that was interesting to me. And also it's a completely fresh topic. A lot of events have already been like studied to death. This is something that will have no data really behind it, at least like not specifically pertaining to that event. So it's fresh territory, and I'm really excited to study it.
Tonight, a deafening silence from the president's Twitter account in his waning days as commander-in-chief. Twitter, run by CEO Jack Dorsey, saying after close review of the president's recent tweets, it banned him due to the risk of further incitement of violence.
When it comes to social media, I'm not an expert on it at all, but I think if there's one lesson to be learned from the insurrection, is that social media should be taken seriously. I think a lot of people forget that we're in this day and age where social media exists, and like I think people just need to understand like it's here to stay. It's not a fad, and people can use it for bad or for good. In the case of January 6th, a lot of things were organized through social media. I'm not sure exactly which platforms off the top of my head, but I'm sure some of it's on Twitter. I know people were like bragging about it on Twitter afterwards. I can only assume something with 4chan was going on. That seems to be where a lot of that stuff starts. Or 8chan now. I think 4chan got just axed totally. But yeah, I think people need to learn, like, if you see these sorts of threats popping up on social media, maybe you should put some more weight behind them than you think you should.